This is our 4-part webinar series, a new approach to assigning resources to outcomes, and this is session 2. My name is Josh Sutton. I'm with the Product Excellence org for SPM, and I'm joined by my colleague Luis, who is also in the same area. We are going to be drilling into resource management in a bit of a different way, and we'll talk about that when we get to the agenda. First and foremost, safe harbor. Anything stated, this is product, things change. So if we say something about Q3 or Q4 and it doesn't happen, you can't hold it against us. Just recap there, the previous session was getting started in fundamentals. Today, we're going to be digging into end-to-end, or how to set up and manage the process of assigning resources. In August, we're going to go over capacity planning with a few other processes, capabilities sprinkled in there. And then we're going to end this 4-part session in September with a roadmap, Q&A, office hours. So the things that you see throughout the first 3 sessions, things that you think about when you're in your org, bring it to that 4th session. We'll be happy to address. We'll also be collecting the Q&A that we get over the 4 sessions or 3 sessions and bringing some of that back to that, that final recap as well. This is just a quick plug for additional live on ServiceNow events. That's where you registered for this one, but we do it for all products and we're constantly adding them. So check that frequently, sign up. We'd love to have you all here. Quick housekeeping. We do have some time for Q&A at the end. Please, please, please use the Q&A feature. Chats will not be answered or you'll be redirected to the Q&A. So let's just use it. Finally, the presentation is recorded, and we're taking that Q&A, and that'll be part of that package when it's released. After the event, there is going to be a survey. I appreciate the feedback. We all do. It helps us get better. It helps us do things and learn. So that's what we take away from that. Can't thank you enough if you do provide that feedback for us. Getting into the agenda, we're going to walk through a bit of the setup of resource management and then working with resource assignments, mostly from a change perspective. We'll have some Q&A and then there'll be some resources at the end as well. I want to note that this is really getting into the depth of resource management. It's not going to be just a high level, this is how you set up and configure. We're not going to show you the things about just simply creating a resource assignment. We did that in the first session. That was the foundation. We're really getting deeper into some edge cases here. So hopefully it is very informative and insightful. I know I had a lot of fun putting this together with Luis. And without further ado, let's get into our first poll question.
I'll bring that up.
Please. Always like to know where you get your information. What's your go-to for SPM products? Now Create, docs pages, the community and our product hubs, our ServiceNow YouTube channel, or I just Google everything when I need it. Wow, that's awesome. Things are flying in. We're already over 50%. The goal is at least 75, so I'll just pause until we actually get there. Come on, 63. Let's get to 75.
Yeah, don't be shy. That's for our own knowledge. So how we can
Yeah.
provide a better information for you. Nearly there.
Yeah, we're at 70. All right, we're tapering down. We'll go ahead and close it. It looks like the majority is I just Google it, which I do the same thing, right? Next is your doc pages. It's awesome. It does have a lot of content. And then followed by Community Hub or the community, and now create. YouTube channel is our last one with 4%. We're hoping to drive a little bit more traffic to the community pages and the product hubs. I think there's a fair amount of people that don't really understand how much content is really there and what it's going to provide. So hopefully we get a little bit of that out of this today as well. We'll move into our first section, and I'm going to pass it over to Luis, and he's going to talk about the installation path and migration from classic resource management and legacy, as we call it. And then I'll go into some system properties settings and wrap up this section with planning attributes. So without further ado, Luis, take it
Thanks,
away.
Josh. Yeah, thank you. So this is a quick recap because we have all the details about the implementation path and the configuration available on the link that will be shared. We are talking about 3 topics: the resource assignment, capacity planning, and the planning attributes that provides for both capabilities. So first step there is to install or upgrade the plugins for Strategic Planning Workspace, Resource Management Workspace, Project Workspace. Next, what you have to do is to enable the resource assignments. Once that's done, we need to define the resource groups, add the users to those groups, define the resource roles, and also associate to those users. That's optional if you want to use resource roles. For enabling resource assignments for demands and epics, if you like to start your process during the demands and also use for epics. Then you move to the planning attributes. That's why it's for both there, because you can use planning attributes for resource assignments, capacity planning, and also that's not on the picture here for generating labor costs from resource assignments. So plan attributes, first step, please review what comes out of the box and configure it if you want. And then you can also add additional plan attributes if that's really required. We have more details on how to do that on next session as well. Generate the employee profiles, populate attributes in the employee profile. Josh is going to cover that with more details on the next slides later on. And then once that is done, you can generate the capacity from those planning attributes. All right, so again, all the details on that link, we have this recorded as well from other webinars if you want to go through more details. So moving on to the next one is just some considerations about how the migration. The first thing is if you have reports and integrations based on resource plans, you may need to review those because the data model changed when you move from 2 resource assignments. And we are going to talk about the data model in a few seconds. Define your migration strategy. You're going to migrate to one project by project or waves, for example, by portfolio, or you want to migrate everybody all together. And of course, don't do that during working hours to not impact people work. Then you have to test as everything that's new. Please test the configuration, test your use case, test the migration as well and the results, and test and measure your strategy to have an estimate of how long you need when you do the migration in production. So you can plan your migration window as well. And of course, not the last but not least, OCM as any change, understand the new process and functionality, communicate that information in advance, what the value that it brings, and provide training to your user community, right? So with that in mind, you are going now to explore some change you can apply on the migration utility. First one is about the ready for review field that's available in resource assignments. That field is used to the requester to signalize to the resource manager when he can act on the resource assignments. So the process, the migration process, what it does is all the resource assignments created from the migration are defined as ready for review, yes. But you may expect another result. You may expect that for resource plans on state planning, that field is marked as no. To simulate more or less what you have before, the request has to signalize as done. You can now please assign someone. To do that, you can update and adapt the migration scripts. Don't worry about the details there, because on the link, you have all the steps and examples on how to make that change to get that result, the expected result. So next one, moving on, is to, in case, just a quick recap as well, we don't have the confirmed states on resource assignments that we had in resource plan. In case you want to have something similar, the migration process doesn't take in consideration all the, if you can move to the next, yes, thank you. All the resource assignments coming from the migration process, that from resource plans or confirmed allocate states, the resource assignments is approved states. So you may expect a different result. You may want the resource assignments coming from the confirmed resource plans that are mapped to these confirmed or similar status in resource assignments. To achieve that, you can create a new status for confirmed, for example, or another name. The name doesn't really matter, but that represents the same as confirmed. And you can adapt the migration script as well to change that mapping to make sure that happens. Again, don't worry about the details. We have that on the community article on that link that will be shared as well. So the next one is about custom fields. You may have created custom fields on resource plans that you want to have the values copied to the new resource assignments, right? The migration utility doesn't copy any custom fields. As you can imagine, you cannot able to predict. So custom fields are not copied over the values. You may expect that some custom fields you still need on resource assignments, and you may want those values to be copied during the migration, right? So the proposed solution is, first of all, please use this as opportunity to review the custom fields you have created on the resource plans. You may don't need all those anymore. It's an opportunity to do a cleanup. And you can also leverage the planning attributes instead of using custom fields. But if you still have few custom fields, you can also change the utility to include those fields there to be copied over to the resource assignments. Repeating myself, the information details are on the link that we will provide as well. Right? So going forward, just a review of the data model. This is a summary of the resource plan data model. When you have the resource plan, you have a cost plan created for that resource plan, and you have some supporting data for requested daily and allocation daily as well. When you run the migration, it's going to create a resource assignment. Click next there, please. Thank you. Create a resource assignment that's linked to the resource allocation as well. The original cost plan is updated to get the planned costs as 0, and a new cost plan or new cost plans are created during the migration based on the planning attributes defined for financials, right? Move on. When you create a new resource assignment that's not from the migration, then you have we still use some classic tables as well for calculation. So we use the resource plan, the resource allocation daily for allocation, calculation, availability, all those things, which use as engineering for calculation. And cost plans created again now based on the planning attributes for finance. There's no link anymore between cost plan and resource plans directly, right? So all details as well, we have recording showing the migration use case on that link that's provided and it's available in the community. The next topic we want to discuss is about the timesheet portal. It's not about the migration, but the behavior of the timesheet portal is not adapted to resource assignments out of the box yet. It may come on the future release. So at the moment, even though you start using resource assignments, the timesheet portal still show the resource plan information. And as a result, all the resource plans from a resource assignment are created on the status allocated, right? So you want to block so meaning you can enter time against any resource plan and resource assignments. What we expect is to show the resource assignment information instead of resource plan and allow time tracking only to the approved resource assignments. To do that, we need to change some page on the portal. You need to define the status on that property there. Josh is going to cover a little bit more in details later on. They exclude the status because that also block the user to change times and submit time for those status and create some additional rules to make sure you're not enter time against not approved time cards or resource assignments. Similarly, all the details and examples are available on that link that will be provided with all the information. Now we have a quick demo to show you before the change, what's the behavior, and after the change, what's the behavior of the timesheet portal. I'm going to show you first the behavior before we adapt timesheet portal with resource assignments. Before I'm going to move to the project workspace, there's a project example I have. And I have here one resource assignment for myself, system administrator, from beginning of July to end of the year, and it's on pending state, right? So if I go to the timesheet portal, you'll see the same project here is available on the task selector. And if I add, I should see the resource plan and the resource plan that's coming from that resource assignment. However, we would expect to not see this project here because the resource assignment state is still pending, it's not approved. And I would also expect once the resource assignment is approved and I add the time card to see the resource assignment, not the resource plan. So I'm going to show now how is the behavior after we apply those changes. Okay, so now I'm in another instance that I have applied the changes on the timesheet portal. Similarly, I have a project where I have a resource assignment assigned to myself, system administrator, from July to end of the year as well. The resource status is pending. So let's see what's the behavior on the timesheet portal. So on timesheet portal, for this week, that's covering that period, I don't have any project. So that project not available here. And I'll go back to the project workspace. I'll change the status to approved. So now we would expect to have this project available here on the task selector. So let me refresh. So we have one project now. That's the project. We just change the resource assignment to approved. And if I add the timesheet to the timesheet portal, so if I add the time card here, now you see have this column resource assignment showing that resource assignment here as well, as expected. Another quick example, in case I have more than one resource assignment, one's pending, the other one's approved, so we are expecting to see only one if I try to select here. And if I change the second one to approve, so I now have two resource assignments for the same period, same project, so I can select one or the other. I see both now, right? So I'll make another test. Say I'm using this one for any reason, there's some attribute there, I need to select another resource assignment. And then I will change this to pending, because if I change something here, this will be updated to pending. And now if I go back and say, now I didn't know that changed as a user, so I'm going to enter time and I'll try to submit. You see here, you cannot update pending. And I'll do another test, I'll send to approval. And I'll try to do the same. 8 hours, let's say after I entered hours here, but I didn't submit, the resource status changed to pending because I have done some adjustments. And I'll try now to submit. So the user, I'm going to try to submit. And I get this message that I cannot submit time card for pending resource assignments. So those changes, as demonstrated here, are preventing to enter time against a resource assignment that's not approved, and the timesheet portal is respecting that on the task selector. Also, now you can select and see the resource assignment as well. Back to you, Josh. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. Appreciate all that info. We're going to dig a little bit deeper into the system properties and the planning attributes now. Luis had just talked about utilizing a certain system property, the comma separated list for resource assignment states. What this is essentially exempting certain states from either allowing timesheet submissions or for availability on that. In session 1, Mark covered that pretty well. So we're going to keep going here. The next 2 items are global defaults. That's basically reducing minimal setup or manual setup. And that's the default schedule name and the average daily FTE and hours per person days. So this is essentially the conversion of what does 1 FTE equal per day. The last setting that we'll be talking about today is the calendar event duration. And by default, it's set at 60 minutes. And we'll go through that, kind of the changes and the effect that that has. Going back to the schedule and the FTE, this is a user record, and we can see that those 2 are blank. So this is in the Resource Manager view. If they are blank, they will accept the defaults, which is fantastic, right? Set it here in the settings, don't have to worry about it in others. We will be covering some certain scenarios in the next section, but for right now, this is kind of that default. Take into account the majority. So if you have other schedules, if you have different locations that have different types of holidays and things like that, set the default schedule for the mass, and then you will have to accommodate the exceptions, right? So just take that into account when you are planning for this. There are some automations and things that you can do to populate certain schedules for, based on certain attributes on a user record. We're not going to cover any of that today, but obviously the system is capable of doing that. So if you're already doing this and you have the classic Resource Management Workspace, nothing you have to do. This is already set for you, right? Great. There's 4 main topics I want to really key into for understanding and decision makings about how your resource assignments and resource management operates within your organization. The first one is the allocation spread. This is really about the monthly versus weekly. Then we're going to talk about granularity, why it's important, what does this that mean, and how does it relate to the allocation spread. Then we're going to talk about FTE and hours, the setup, some default calculations, things like that. And finally, we'll wrap with the schedules. One of the scenarios that we'll be talking through with schedules is, what if I have on-call schedules? That's a big area that we need to consider very carefully. So going into the allocation spread, the default value, and this is a field value, so this is not a system property, but it is a field on your resource assignments. It's called the allocation type. Previously, and resource plans, this was also there, but it was exposed on the form by default. It is not with resource assignments. So could you re-expose it? You absolutely can. Or you decide on how do I want to see the allocation spread? And do I want to key into the month, which is what the default is, and see the spread across each month, honoring calendar month boundaries, regardless of the week structure? Or do I want to go in a weekly view? And we'll show you kind of the differences there. Know that if it is set to monthly and that's what I create, toggling on Resource Management Workspace or on Project Workspace to weekly will not alter the allocations. It just shows it in the different week-by-week view. So monthly is really about that high-level effort planning, month-end reporting needs, things like that. If your organization needs it week by week and it needs to be more evenly broken down, I would consider changing that to weekly. So let's take a look at what it looks like when we have it. I've got 2 resources here, Andrew Porter and Steve Torrey. One of them has an allocation type of monthly on their resource assignment. The other is weekly. We can see with the month of August, it kind of looks like, well, we're the same. As we get into other months, it can vary and things like that. But as we toggle from the monthly view to the weekly view, we can see the true difference here. So even though Steve Torrey in August had 0.2, it's kind of a fluke that happened that way, because August just seems to be a perfect month. But week over week, we can see the difference. Steve is 0.2, 0.2, 0.2, 0.2. But Andrew has a little bit more in the first couple weeks and less in the last weeks. When you have a month split midweek, that's also going to impact that spread. So if monthly is all you're going to be looking at, and that's fine for you, you're good. Set the default or leave the default. And weekly, I would say kind of change it over. The other thing to note, a change of this default does not retroact. So same thing with the system properties. At the point of change, that is when things will start to take effect, right? Anything prior to that, you will either have to be updated or you just kind of make the transition at a point, right? The next topic we're going to look at is granularity. And so this is that calendar event duration system property. Default is 60 or 1 hour. And we're going to look at what's the difference if we go down to 6 minutes or a tenth of an hour. This is not user specific. As I said, this is a system property, so this is global. And it really takes into account when you need to get to precision. We're going to use an example of an 8 hours over 3 weeks. So if we look at this and keep the default, we get halfway through week 2 and run out of hours. So it's essentially week 3, no allocations. Now, you can go in and adjust the hours by week. Think about doing that for all of your resource assignments that get created. That can be a daunting task. You may want that level of control, and that's perfectly acceptable. So leave it as this and then adjust from there. But what if we set that to 6 minutes or 1/10 of an hour? We can see that it's actually going to loop. Okay, so that is not repeated or week over week over week through 7, 8, 9 weeks. This is actually the same 3 weeks being replicated. So it distributes at 6-month increments, day by day by day, and then it loops back once it hits the end of the duration of the assignment. What that ultimately looks like in the end is we have week 1 with day over day of 36 minutes, and then week 2, day over day of 30 minutes, same with week 3, ultimately ending with 3 hours, 2.5, and 2.5. This is really important too when you're using multiple, say like sets and FTE, because it can help prevent FTE rounding. You know, if you don't have enough 1-hour blocks to meet a 0.1 FTE, then this could help you to actually hit 0.1, right? Because it'll loop through. The smaller the slice, the cleaner the spread. That's essentially, you pair this with the weekly or the monthly, and that will have a different effect as well. So just note that. One of the foundations of capacity we're talking about is FTE, and hours and schedules. FTE equals percentage of available capacity. It is not a fixed hour count, right? So different months may have different hours, but it's still 1 FTE. Holidays also impact the hours that equate to the FTE. Same folks, we've got Andrew and Steve. Andrew's in the UK, Steve's in the US. When I look at July, Steve's got 8 hours less than Andrew does. They're both on the same 8-hour a day schedule, but because of that holiday in July for the US, Steve's got 8 hours less. Same thing with the UK with Andrew. There's a holiday in August, so his month of August is 8 hours less. But if we look back, it's still 1 FTE. Going into the schedules a little bit more, the consideration that we're using here is on-call scheduling. We can see that Fred Luddy has a schedule already set there. That is his on-call schedule for hardware support. He is the primary for that. So we can't clear it out to take the default, because then we'll lose the on-call scheduling. We also can't set it to what would be the default is the resource management, because again, it will clear out the on-call scheduling. So what we have to use, oops, apologies. What we have to use is the related schedule. And I'm just going to build this out because my animations don't work. The related schedule. We have to include a resource management schedule that is related to their user record. We then have to generate the capacity. If you do not generate capacity once you set that related schedule, it actually invokes this user for resource availability, and it will take the on-call schedule. We don't want that. Now, because we run the update resource capacity, the on-call schedule is exempt. It is not a resource schedule. So we have no fear of that being the resource schedule and put my on-call scheduling on there. Doesn't happen. So we want to identify those resources, give them the related schedule, update their capacity. This will give us the accurate availability for these users. Moving into our next topic of planning attributes, it's really another foundation of capacity, but also our assignments. And strong recommendation to think about this in a capacity planning perspective. How do I want to see the grouping and capacity of my folks, my people, my users, my resources? Even if you're not using capacity planning right now, or even in the future, think of it in that light, because planning attributes really are that common currency that help with capacity planning and impacts your resource management and assignment processes. Okay. These planning attributes out of the box ones are stored on the employee profile. So associated record to your user record. And we'll talk about the employee profile here in just a second, a little bit more detail. But as we stated in the session one, group, role, and skill are our primary resources, or primary attributes. They really drive capacity aggregation, reporting, assignment filtering, selection in our resource management workspace and project workspace. And as stated again, they're stored on the employee profile. Now we can do additional custom attributes. We're not going to cover that today. We just have so much content that we just couldn't get to everything, but we will cover the custom attributes in our next session on capacity planning and see how it kind of works into there. So let's focus a little bit more on that employee profile. Some of you may not be aware of it. Some of you are, but maybe there's some things that you aren't familiar with. But this is where our primary attributes are. This is the source for it, right? So we can see that we've got the group and the role primary attributes filled in here. Resource skill, it would still be, it's still relevant. It's just not for Elvis, right? He doesn't have a primary resource skill. We also have this user field, and this is, again, it's the tie-in between. So in order to ensure that we are not duplicating capacity, that's where the primary resources come in, or I'm sorry, primary attributes come in. But let's take a look a little bit deeper on this before we get back into the planning attributes, because I want to share a little bit more about this employee profile. It really is a source of truth. One of the key things that you see here is the internal. So this is the employee type. This can be used to determine, is it an internal or an external employee? If that matters in your organization, it's already here. Further, if you're using the HR or you have automation with the user record from Active Directory that populates a custom field of internal, external, you can leverage that to populate the employee profile as well. The next thing we want to talk about is the employment start date. Same scenarios, if you're using HR, you have that on your user records, you can automatically populate that here. This means no capacity can be generated prior to this date. So if you're looking to staff a resource for a particular resource assignment and they're not showing up, that's because they may not have capacity, and it's because they haven't started yet when that starts, right? The next thing is employment end date, and this has a lot more meat to it. So just like with start date, no capacity can be generated after the employment end date. We also have a scheduled job that needs to be configured for frequency, but it's there out of box on demand to be ran. Resource termination handler. What this does is it actually goes out and it looks for the users with PPS resource, and it will check to see if they have an employment end date on their employee profile. It will then remove all the allocations past that end date. Now, take note, this does not reduce the assignments for that resource. It will just get rid of the allocations post employment end date. And again, reiterating, the user must have PPS resource role for the script to pick it up. So if you're doing one-day terms and things like that, or you have some automation where a user record goes inactive, and then you remove the roles, be aware of that and plan for that appropriately. Because if the job doesn't have time to run before that role is removed, it's not going to pick it up and it will not get rid of those allocations. So just be aware of that. But going back to the planning attributes, there's a few different ways of being able to set this. I can go in and I can manually set them, or I build some automation with Flow and all those types of things to set the primary resource group, primary resource role. This is really key when there are multiples. So there is no escape from manually doing it, whether it's with the automation or that you've created, or you go in and you actually address this. Catalog items can help that as well. I've seen that with customers and things. But that's really to account for the ones where I have I'm part of multiple resource groups, or I have multiple resource roles. If you don't, you have one of each, or one or the other, we have some automation already pre-built. So down at the bottom of the employee profile, if I'm going in, I'm managing these profiles, I can populate the primary resource attributes by just clicking that link. It goes out, finds the member the group that they're a member of, or the role that they have, and it will automatically populate that if it is a single. If it's not, see example number 1. Further to that, we have a scheduled execution, or a script execution that runs. You can configure this to run it to your frequency. Again, just like the termination handler, it's out of the box, but its default is on demand. So this will go out nightly, quarter, whatever you set that as, and it will find all the resource people, see what groups they're members of for the resources, and see what resource roles they have. If they have one, it automatically sets it. Good to go. Don't have to worry about it. Let's plan for the exceptions then, right? This is really key to the reducing duplicative capacity. So yes, you can absolutely be part of multiple resource groups if that's how you operate. You can have multiple resource roles, but we don't want to double count those individuals to inflate capacity for all of the roles that they have or the groups that they're a part of. So that's where primary is absolutely key here. Next section, we're going to work on assignments, changes with them, how to manage those different changes, all of that. In session 1, we showed you how to set them up, request, use the different methodologies of centralized, decentralized, and hybrid. We're not covering that here. We're getting a little bit deeper for you. The 4 key change scenarios that are pretty prevalent, because inevitably change is going to happen on a project. It's not just set it and, oh, there it is. We don't have to worry about anything. We're going to look at pre-start changes, and that's really about date shifts before work begins. Post-start changes is we need to shift things or extend or change when we've actually started the work. Talk about assignment splits, what happens when things happen with that resource mid-flight, and then group or parent assignments and how you can gain some efficiencies to cascade down for child assignments or the user assignments that are related to a group assignment. So first one we're going to talk about is that pre-start change. And here, demand is always pre-start. You're planning for the future. So as dates change for the demand and I have resource assignments, right there on that demand record, click on realign assignments to demand. Good to go. It updates them. No worries. For project, it's similar, but within Project Workspace, most of the time when you're in a project, you're already in flight, right? But there are the occasions where you are planning for things and dates change or whatever the case may be. If the start date changes, but the duration does not, that is what we classify as a shift of a date or a duration. If I extend, this does not apply. We'll cover that in the next one, right? But I have this resources not synced that pops up, and I click the little icon and it'll go through and it will update all of the project level resource assignments as well as any task level resource assignments. Again, only the ones that are shifting, not extending, that we don't account for that in this scenario. So let's talk about shifting, but extending. So post-start changes, let's take the gather business requirements task, for example. We can see that it actually slipped by 2 weeks. What did that do? That extended the parent task, which is the planning phase, as well as the overall project. So we can no longer classify this as a shift. Things have started, resource assignments are different than what the tasks now are. And so how do we account for this? We use the extend option. So within Project Workspace, hit the 3 ellipses right next to the resource assignment, click extend. What this does is it pops up a modal box and I set the new end date based on what that task is that I need to, fulfill. I also will set the additional effort. So this will not rewrite anything previously. So for that new time period, what do I need to allocate these people to, right? Change of an assignment outside of the end date of a task will not happen. So you have to extend the task first. Sticking with this example, I can see that the planning phase extended, but any predecessors that haven't started yet, now we're back in that pre-start change. The dates shifted, duration stayed the same, start date just changed, right? I can use the resources not synced if I'm doing at the task level resource assignments. So the only ones that are hindered are the ones that are extending. Anything else, if it's just a shift, that'll sync up, no problem. Moving on to the next example of change is assignment splits. A split is basically when something happens or changes within a given resource assignment. This example, we're taking Jessica Harris. She is approved for March through August on a resource assignment, but she's actually changing roles at the end of June, so she needs to get out of this project. What we can do is we click on Split Resource Assignment. Set the date of the start of the new assignment, right? Say that again, it's the start of the new assignment, right? What this does is it gives us 2 resource assignments, both assigned to Jessica, both still in approved status. One example that can be leveraged here as well is if I need to change a longer duration of the resource assignment, say I'm in March and April and I have actuals on that, but I'm through the end of 2026. That's a whole lot of stuff that I have to go and update one by one because you can't change the overall effort. It's locked. It's got actuals on it. So you can actually split to accommodate that as well. I'm going to split it in June, knowing that I run for another 18 months. Now I can update the overall effort of that second resource assignment. Yes, you have 2 resource assignments with the same person. It's okay. We're doing it for accommodating change. Let's go back to this example, stay on topic, and let's look at it. Now we have 2 resource assignments, both still assigned to Jessica, both still approved. I have a couple options. I can reassign, or I can unassign. If I choose to unassign, it will take Jessica out, set the status back to unassigned, and goes back to be resourced, right? Or I can also reassign the work. Now, reassignment only works when the primary attributes of Jessica are exactly the same for the new resource. If that is not the case, you go back to unassign and then you just assign it. Once we reassign the work, now we have Jessica ending at the end of June and Christina picking up on July to take out the rest. It does set it to pending. You'll have to approve it, just how it goes when you make changes. Finally, let's look at group or parent assignments. We can use these to cascade changes. The three key elements are effort, resource status, and the dates. From a perspective of creating a group assignment with multiple people, your effort is the calculation that you want to provide across the assignments. So 2 FTE for 8 resources, it's 0.25. We covered that in the first session as well. But I don't want to have to go in and approve every single one of these. Great. Just go to the group assignment, change the status to approved, cascades down, good to go. If I need to change the dates, I can do that to drive change for the downstream child assignments. Caveat, if I have any actuals on one of these resource assignments that are a child, everybody else will get changed. That one is locked. Actuals are your state, your kind of lock for things and changes. You'll have to go into the individual, change it there. So let's recap with a little bit of system behavior and constraints. Extend only if the task planned end date allows it. You cannot extend past. Just not going to happen. The system blocks it. Use weekly view for granular edits. If I have actuals on a resource assignment, but it's only for the first 2 weeks of a month, yeah, my month will be locked down. I can't change the effort for it. But if I change to weekly, now I can edit those last 2 weeks of the month. Fantastic. I'm not blocked from being able to do that. Do not try to modify locked resource assignments. Ones that have actuals, you will not be able to do. Do not create customizations that allow you to do that, because you will break what is essentially auditing of the system. It's enforcing better practices, right? Finally, reassign won't work if the primary attributes aren't identical to the new resource. You'll have to unassign first. So when changes happen, resource assignments go back to pending. We have this little bell icon that alerts that changes have been made and action is required. Summary of this is not all changes are equal. Understand the differences between those 4 kind of scenarios we ran through. It is designed to prevent errors, right? Know where the controls live and understand how to work with the system, because there's ways of doing it. If you find things, raise it. We'll look into it. Actuals are your gating mechanism, and it's just, they lock things down. If I plan for something and I only have actuals, if I try to change that plan, what am I doing with that data? Now I'm just changing it and I don't have that historical what I planned. I can't get better. So actuals lock things down. Finally, split and extend are your 2 most powerful tools to handle changes mid-project. Thank you so much for the time that we've had. Let's go into some Q&A. Luis, is there anything that we want to answer live?
Yeah, there's a question from Tommy asking that, resource assignment shouldn't be deleted when there is actuals, is correct. If there's a message, it's a message on the classic form as we have on the project workspace.
Did you get an error when you try and delete an assignment with actuals? And it's being answered right now.
Yeah.
we'll state that when we.
Yeah, there's another one interesting, Josh, is about the shift of demands or projects, saying what happens basically if I shift this, if I shift the start date, but the end date remains the same, what that realigned would do in this case.
So essentially what you're doing is you're reducing the assignment at that point.
You are reducing the task, the demand of projects period. So starting later than planned, but keeping the end date.
Yep. So what that does is you've already set an effort for that resource assignment. I believe, and I will double check, but I believe what happens is you have then a shorter time period with the same amount of effort. There's another one in here. If the start date of either a demand or okay, that was the one that you were
That's
talking
the
about.
one. Yeah, I need to say answer live. What else we have here? How can the manager see now what changes have been made when the assignment goes back to pending? Right, he got that icon that Josh mentioned. If you went to pending, you see the icon on the resource management allocation.
Yep.
There's no details about how many hours or so, but there's a notes option where the resource manager and project manager can use to communicate, okay, what I need, what was changed, and use that capability as well to make the communication flow about those details. And that we think we have a community article to show how to include the notes on the workspace as well, if that helps.
Correct. Yep. So the other
So-
thing I will state that is, one of the things that's been around since the beginning of ServiceNow is the notifications. If that's necessary and needed, you can always add some notifications. The other thing to note is while changing things within resource management, not everything is audited, but effort is, and there are a few others that are as well. So you can see kind of the activity, and that goes along with the notes on that community article as well. So let's talk about training and enablement. Obviously on the left side, we've got our ServiceNow University. Here's our fundamentals, implementer. There's additional resource management training, and then all things SPM. On the other side, we've got community. I'm going to stick with this one for just a minute. We have, for almost every SPM application or suite of products, if you will, quick start guides. We have a resource management quick start guide. Everything that we contribute is going to be linked there. I highly encourage all of you to go out to the community, go to the Strategic Portfolio Management Hub, and find those quick start guides and subscribe to them. That is a vault of information that's going to continuously be updated. And as we add things like session 1, it's linked there. We are going to comment so that you are notified of those changes, whether it's an additional or we change something because guess what? We've got new features that happen and this becomes irrelevant, right? Or it gets, it's now legacy. Please, please, please go out there. I can't stress that enough. We also have Delta decks and events. So things like this are linked there as well. One last thing from an event perspective is the, vision series. And that is you have to basically be asked to get into that. That's where we do twice a year roadmap views. Finally, we have a plethora of customer success, services. ServiceNow Impact can very much help getting the most value. I kind of guiding you through certain things, but really making sure that you're getting what you're paying for. And you know about what you're paying for as well. That's a key activity that Impact does. Training and certifications, we covered that. in the last slide, educate yourself. Doesn't hurt, right? Just like this. And then don't go it alone. If you need help, there's help out there. Our expert services or great SPM partners as well. You can find those in the expert services community, partner finder. Make sure you're guided along the way. Again, thank you all for joining. Really appreciate the interaction. Got a lot of questions that I will be going through. Just to note and a reminder, this will be posted. It takes about 7 business days. But if you subscribe to the Resource Management Quick Start Guide, you're going to be able to get notified when that gets linked there. It'll also be on the Live On Now. It has its own page. So if you're registered, you should get a notification as well. Hopefully this was insightful. It gave you a lot to think about, but also gave you a little bit more intention around why our products are the way they are and how we're looking to operate things.
Yes,
Have a
and
great week, everyone.
please join the next session as well as we go further
yes.
in other topics that we may not able to cover today. We get more details on the next session. So please stay with us.